I left because the relationship became real, and I became convinced I couldn't give you what you wanted without losing myself. Loving you properly required more communication, consistency, compromise, and honesty than I believed I could sustain. I thought staying would expose my limits and prove you had believed in the wrong person, so I left before you could. Instead of disappointing you slowly and honestly, I disappointed you all at once. I called that kinder. It wasn't. I chose the pain I could control over waiting for your admiration to become disappointment. I rejected you before you could reject me. You searched our conversations for the moment you became difficult to love. There wasn't one. I wanted to be loved. I didn't know how to love someone back responsibly. Confession 1. I taught you to expect a future. I pursued you, sent the long messages, opened parts of myself I usually kept hidden, and spoke about the life we might build. I meant them. Talking about the future let me feel committed before I had to practice commitment. I saw your hope and imagined myself as the dependable person you believed I was. The future was safe because it wasn't here yet. I could imagine devotion without practicing it when I felt tired, ashamed, or desperate to be alone. I promised on behalf of a version of myself who existed only in my head. It didn't feel false. I wanted that life whenever I pictured it. Then the future acquired dates. You protected time for me and asked when we would meet again, what I wanted, and where this was going. Those questions followed naturally from what I had encouraged you to believe. But every possibility became a promise, and every promise became something you were entitled to expect. The future stopped being somewhere I could visit in my head and became a life I had to help build. What I had described as beautiful began to feel heavy because it had become real. When you said you trusted me, part of me felt loved. Another thought, what happens when you realize I'm not dependable? I felt wanted and trapped because I didn't trust myself to carry it. I wasn't lying about wanting the future. I was lying to myself about what wanting it proved. Confession 2. I hid my limits and blamed you for them. The first real problem wasn't that you expected too much. It was that I didn't know how to tell you what I could give. I wanted to seem calm, flexible, and easy to love. If I wanted a night alone, I agreed to see you anyway. If a conversation felt too intense, I said I was fine, and became distant afterward. I said yes when I meant maybe, maybe when I meant no, and nothing was wrong when something clearly was. I had never learned that a boundary could be a way of staying connected. Saying no felt like rejection. Asking for space felt like admitting I didn't love you enough. So I skipped the small, honest disappointments that might have protected us. I didn't say, not tonight but tomorrow, or I can give you this, but not that. I knew how to tolerate discomfort until it became resentment, and disappear once the resentment became unbearable. I didn't know how to disappoint you a little and remain beside you. Then I treated the life created by my own answers as though you had forced it upon me. I felt crowded by plans I had agreed to and called you demanding without ever saying when I needed quiet. I accused you of resisting space while giving you unexplained withdrawal. A boundary would have let you decide whether what I could offer was enough. Instead, I concealed my limits, overextended myself, and treated the resulting resentment as proof the relationship was wrong. I expected you to respect boundaries I had never expressed. I became cold until you stopped trying. I canceled and treated your disappointment as pressure. I questioned our compatibility rather than admitting I was frightened by how serious we had become. I avoided disappointing you honestly until I could only devastate you. Confession 3. I made you carry the fear. You weren't demanding perfection. You were asking for basic consistency, but every reasonable expectation became a test I was certain I would fail. When you asked for communication, plans, or repair, I heard permanent obligation. I could imagine only complete independence or complete responsibility, not two people with needs, limits, and separate lives. That's why your patience frightened me. You said you didn't need perfection, only honesty. Part of me heard love. Another heard, now you have no excuse not to try. Repair meant risking an honest attempt and still failing. I feared protecting my freedom would disappoint you, while trying never to disappoint you would make me disappear. My messages became shorter. I stopped initiating and canceled plans with explanations plausible enough to avoid a real argument. You asked whether something was wrong. I said no. You asked whether my feelings had changed. I said you were overthinking. My behavior told you one thing and my words another until you stopped trusting yourself. You wanted clarity and I called you demanding. You wanted repair and I said you couldn't let things go. When you admitted, I know I get anxious, I used it to ignore what had made you anxious. When I finally asked for space, I gave you no real boundary. I didn't say, I need tonight, I'll call tomorrow. I disappeared without saying when I would return. I got the distance I wanted while you carried the uncertainty. I was afraid of failing, so you became afraid of asking. I was afraid of losing myself, so you made yourself smaller. I transferred my fear into you, then judged you for becoming afraid. Confession 4. I left and called relief the truth. After I ended the relationship, the first thing I felt was relief. There was no difficult conversation waiting. I didn't have to explain why I had changed, face your disappointment, or wait for the imagined day you left me. I had ended the uncertainty myself. My body relaxed, and I treated that relief as proof I was right. But I wasn't relieved because you were gone. I was relieved because I no longer had to confront my fear that I would fail you. I mistook relief for rightness and built a story about incompatibility. It hid the larger truth. I encouraged the future, hid my discomfort, withdrew and used your reaction as evidence that leaving was necessary. The relief lasted about a week. There were no plans to keep and no conversations to finish. Then I noticed your absence. I missed the way you listened, our private jokes, and the comfort of being known. I remembered the future we had imagined, now without having to live inside it. At a distance, the future became weightless again. I could miss being loved without confronting the responsibility of loving you back. So I checked your social media, opened our old messages, and sent something small. I was thinking about you. I saw something that reminded me of you. It took me less than a minute. For you, it reopened the relationship. You thought losing you had made me ready to explain, apologize, and rebuild. For a short time, I sounded like the person you remembered. The warmth was real, but it wasn't supported by a decision. I wanted to know whether you still cared without taking responsibility for what that hope required. Then your hope became visible. You suggested meeting and asked what my message meant. Suddenly, contact had consequences. The imagined reunion became another real future with dates, choices, and expectations. My messages slowed down. I said I didn't want to give you the wrong idea, even though my behavior already had. I returned because missing you felt safe. The moment you became a real person with real hopes again, I withdrew. I left you with 2 injuries. First, I disappeared. Then I returned long enough to make you believe the disappearing was over. I wasn't always consciously manipulating you, but I used contact to regulate my loneliness and guilt. I wanted access to your warmth without giving you security. That was selfish, even when it wasn't calculated. You weren't wrong for believing the contact meant something. I missed you, and the relationship affected me, but I hadn't solved the fear that made me leave. My feelings had returned. My ability had not changed. Confession 5. Regret didn't make me capable. I regretted losing you and understood more with time. None of that changed my behavior. Regret is a feeling. You needed action. I could explain my shame so well that understanding sounded like progress. but explanation can become another way to avoid responsibility. Real change was less dramatic. It meant saying, "I'm overwhelmed. I need an hour. I'll call you at 8. Then calling at 8. I had always known how to leave. The change was returning after solitude started persuading me that the conversation no longer mattered. It meant saying no before yes became resentment and trusting that your disappointment didn't make you my enemy. It meant showing you my limitations, hearing how my behavior affected you, and resisting the urge to defend myself, collapse into shame, or make you comfort me. It meant learning that compromise isn't surrender. Neither of us had to disappear. It also meant accepting that honesty could still lead to rejection. You were allowed to decide that what I offered wasn't enough. Leaving before that conversation protected me from rejection by guaranteeing the loss myself. I chose certainty over intimacy. My fear was real. I believed loving you might consume me, and disappointing you would make you stop loving me. But real fear still causes real damage. My past explains why commitment frightened me. It doesn't make you responsible for waiting. The relationship was real. You didn't invent it. I meant the affectionate things I said and pictured a future with you. I wanted it while it remained a beautiful possibility. Then it became a responsibility, and I panicked under the weight of expectations I had helped create. The good moments were real. The harm was real too. You didn't ask for too much. You asked for more than I believed I could provide. Those aren't the same thing. You wanted my behavior to match the intimacy I had encouraged. That was my limitation, not your excess. Most of the time, you didn't ignore my boundaries. I barely expressed them. You couldn't respect limits I wouldn't state. And yes, I was afraid of disappointing you. You believed I could be a good partner. Part of me loved being seen that way. Another part was terrified you would discover how little confidence I had in my ability to sustain it. I was so afraid I would fail you eventually that I chose to fail you immediately. I was so afraid you would reject the real version of me that I rejected you while you were still asking me to stay. Because I never said this, you thought my decision reflected something lacking in you. It didn't. Remaining close required me to reveal my limits, tolerate your disappointment, and trust that neither of us had to disappear. I didn't know how. Whatever I felt, I didn't turn it into behavior you could rely on. I withdrew when you needed clarity and returned without being prepared to repair what I had broken. Wanting commitment didn't make you controlling, and being hurt by my distance didn't make you weak. Fear made you chase answers. It didn't create the situation. Stop studying my silence as though it contains a final judgment about you. It doesn't. My withdrawal showed I couldn't remain present. My relief showed escape removed the pressure. My return showed I missed you. My second withdrawal showed missing you had not made me capable. Only changed behavior would have shown readiness. I did care. I also failed you. Let both facts exist. I'm sorry I encouraged a future I wasn't prepared to build. Expected you to respect boundaries I never expressed. Accepted your care while treating your needs as pressure, and rejected you before you had the chance to know me fully. I'm sorry I returned without considering what that would reopen. Stop trying to prove you were worthy of being treated properly. You were. Keep your loyalty, warmth, patience, and emotional courage. Stop giving them to someone who values those qualities only when they require nothing in return. I have been the relationship detective, and thank you for watching. If this helped you see things more clearly, please give it a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. I wish everyone watching all the best, and I hope to see you again in the next one.